Hello and welcome here to another edition of Best of the West, a National League West podcast for Blake Street Banner. I am your host, Skyler Timmins, joined here once again by Kenneth Weber.
What up, what up? How you doing, Skyler?
Hanging in there.
Rocking the Fresno Grizzlies today. I love it.
Indeed, and noticing that my pennants keep falling off my back wall with that tape.
You got to go thumbtacks. To hell with the drywall. Let it break.
Hey, this house is only like 40 years old or something, so we're all
It'll
good.
be fine. Isaac checking in early. I love it. What's up, Isaac?
Yeah, we're going a little bit early today because Kenneth has got to go hit some dingers later on, we assume.
Yay. That or try to rob him. We'll see what happens first.
Whichever comes first. But a lot of fun stuff to talk about here today. We're trying to figure out, and Kenneth, injuries, every team deals with them, but it's an impact that some teams are better equipped than others at the end of the day. But the National League West has been not immune to the injury bug. Some have been hit worse than others. Figure, well, let's check in on these teams, see who's been injured, what's the status, and how the teams have fared in the absence of some of these players, and tests of depth, all that stuff, because injuries are a big part of the game. It takes more than 26 guys to finish a major league season.
Hey, that's why you have a 40-man roster in the first place behind it, right?
Yeah.
But it's inevitable. You have 162 games over the course of a season. Guys are going to break down. Baseball is really a test of endurance, and like you mentioned, some are getting hit sooner than others,
Mm-hmm.
and also, some we've worried this whole time won't have the depth if the injury bug does start biting them. Where some others we feel stronger. So I think it's a good time for an inventory check in that first month of the season, see how the NL West is doing so far, either avoiding injuries or dealing with them.
Yeah, and I think the one that kind of spurs this topic the most. Let's start with the bottom of the National League West, Kenneth, because get them out of the way. This is just
Bottom
one.
of the National League West, the National League, and baseball.
Yeah. But let's start with the Colorado Rockies, where this is just everything that can go wrong has gone wrong for the Colorado Rockies. Finishing the first full month of the season, 5-25, on pace to win 20 some odd games. One of the worst teams in baseball history at the moment, and a lot of things that played into it. Just bad performance on the field, all kinds of stuff. But another factor that ties into it has been the injury bug, where their depth has really been tested here in this early goings of the season.
Yeah, I don't think you can confidently look at any team ever in baseball and say that's a 20-win team.
Yeah.
That's just for the right reasons. It's an unsustainable pace that the Rockies are on. So you have to think that some part of their putrid start is because of these injuries, which they're hit harder than a lot of other teams in baseball. I think people forget that. How big of a difference is that making? That's really where the question
Yeah.
is. But right now, I mean, Chris Bryant's going to be its own can of worms to unpack, but you've had long stretches without Ezekiel Tovar now and Brenton Doyle for other reasons outside of the injury bug. But when you start losing some of your best players and the biggest free agent acquisition, one of your stalwarts in your rotation, so to speak, all of that is a minus right now for Colorado. So it is fair to say that this has been a pretty big detriment and part of their really horrible start to the season.
Yeah, and one of them, two of these happened like right in spring training, and
Mm-hmm.
a guy that they signed during the offseason that was supposed to be a key figure at second base was
The guy
Tyro
they signed.
Estrada.
The
Yeah,
only guy they signed.
like Tyro Estrada, who they're like, okay, Kyle Farmer, we signed him, but he's going to be our utility infielder, move around, and Estrada, he's going to be our second baseman. He's got that Gold Glove potential at second base. He's a high contact guy. We're going to use him in the lineup. But then Kumar Rocker hits him in the wrist with a pitch during spring training, breaks his wrist, and he was out. And they're hoping, 6 to 8 weeks he'll be out or so. But during a checkup, they're like, there's still a fracture in that wrist. It's not healing the way we want it to yet. And so he got moved to the 60-day injured list just out of necessity. So it gets tough in that aspect. Hopefully I didn't lose Kenneth here. But it's one of those things where you lose a guy like Tyler Estrada, and it plays a big key role here in the Rockies' just putrid start to the season, because you immediately lose a guy who, unfortunately, well, he's not in that lineup every day like you'd hoped for. And so, luckily, Kyle Farmer's been able to step in and do his thing, but it's you hopefully feel a little bit better. We'll get Kenneth back in here as soon as possible. But losing Estrada, it's rough, because now you're kind of forced to immediately, you're on your heels at the start of the season. Now, is this team going to be any better with Estrada and Farmer? Probably not. But it's exemplified even more when then we lose Tovar, and then your middle of your infield all of a sudden is not who you want it to be. And so we'll touch on that in a second once Kenneth gets back in here. But it's just those injuries. Every team deals with injuries, and it's just unlucky. You can't plan for it. Well, you kind of can plan for it, but you can't expect them, type of thing. Can't always anticipate them. And some of these guys who are known for being those grinders, like Ezequiel Tovar, they were grinders out there. And so you hope and wonder, what do you do with some of these guys? You know, as you try to fill the gaps in between them. But it makes you wonder what this team would look like if Estrada had been able to stick around. You know, if he was on the field, is it much different for this team if Estrada's on the field or not? You know, I don't know. Is this team 5-25 with Estrada still? Yeah, probably. Maybe they squeak out a couple more wins? Maybe. But are they better off than they are now, even with some of these guys on the field? That's a question that it's hard to find the answer to and whatnot. But I don't know. But hopefully we get Kenneth hustling back in here. I can see him lurking around in the getting the link and whatnot. But it's tough. Type of thing. But you hope that wrist, Patrick Saunders talking about Estrada would be back by roughly sometime in May, hopefully, maybe by the end of May. Which, can this team survive another month with what they're doing and still get through it all healthy? Because even guys like Kyle Farmer, was dealing with back injuries that they mentioned. He's dealing with that. So your middle infield is absolutely messed up. And who knows what they figure out that they're able to do. Missing Tovar, like you mentioned, Isaac, most Tovar hasn't played since 2022. Yeah, and that's when he debuted. Played a week of games. It's tough. Because he's your stalwart at shortstop. You were going to have a really good defensive infield with Estrada at second, Tovar at short, Rymack at third, Tully at first. That was supposed to be, Dick Monfort's best defense in the history of baseball. Gold gloves all around, all that potential. Immediately you're on your back foot, where then the injuries have hindered defensive capabilities, especially for Tovar. Injuries have robbed you of the best second baseman probably you had coming into camp in Tyler Estrada. Now they've been on their back foot, where Adiel Amador's been having to try and figure it out. He's still learning the position. He's not winning the Gold Glove anytime soon, but he's getting there. He's developing. And Farmer's good enough, but definitely not your best options that you want out there. And it's frustrating, I'm sure. But I don't know. It's tough go of it for the Rockies, and whatnot. But missing Estrada, that middle infield, missing Tovar, it hurts, because then that's down into the depth issues with a lot of these for the Rockies, especially middle infield. They called up Aaron Schunk, pulls his left groin, he's on the injured list. Okay, what do we do? Because we call up Owen Miller, he can kind of play middle infield, but shortstop's kind of relatively new for him again these days. So you got to hope he can figure that out. You're running low on options, and they didn't want to call up another rookie in Ryan Ritter to the roster. That would have been your really only other option. And so it was either that or go out and get somebody. That's the route they go. And now we have Alan Trejo back with the Rockies, starting at shortstop pretty much every day as we get Kenneth back in here.
Trying to. There it is. We're going with the cell phone to start this. Sorry about that.
There you
Comcast
go.
strikes again.
Well, like I was just mentioning, talking about Estrada, that sucks. And it's into the depth issues that the Rockies are having in the middle infield, where now we have Alan Trejo as your starting shortstop, and then just kind of a revolving door in that middle infield with Kyle Farmer, Adiel Amador, Owen Miller will mix in there, of not a whole lot to, not the infield defense that they had envisioned at the start of the season.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you're really hoping that Amador is going to take over at some point and team up with Tovar. It just really stinks for Colorado and their fans, where you knew that some depth was going to be needed over time, and it's okay if you have a Band-Aid of a Tyro Estrada, or you have some depth pieces of a Kyle Farmer or an Owen Miller for when you need them. But really, ripping that package open this early in the season is setting you up for hundreds of at-bats for guys that you don't see much long-term future with Colorado. And so it's adding insult to injury a little bit with it, because the guy that they're setting the table for, he still needs some seasoning. And so you were hoping Estrada would give you a longer leash, and hey, maybe even that could turn into a deadline asset or something like that for him. Man, the best laid plans, though, are really going by the wayside with Colorado. And again, was Tyro Estrada the answer? No, probably not. But he would have helped improve this team a little bit. And then just on the note of the injury, it's super unfortunate because wrists and hitters are a very dangerous combination when those injuries occur. And so I don't think anybody should necessarily be upset that he's delayed, because it's a very serious thing when it comes to the technique and the mechanics of hitting. So he needs to be fully healthy for kind of his longevity of his career too. So it's unfortunate timing for an unfortunate position that Estrada was in, and also a pretty unfortunate injury too.
Yeah, and like you said, hopefully Amador can just make the most of the time he has, and we're starting to see that growth with him. So that's like the silver lining with that depth there. It's on the other side of second base is where you're like, man, I hope Tovar's hips can magically get cured. But even then, they're like, well, he's probably gonna have to deal with discomfort the rest of the year, and you're like, ugh.
That's probably the worst thing you can say. The rest of the year is probably not going to go great for him. Man, we are not even a month through this season to start. So, looking at the long-term difficulties of it, that's tough. You hope that he bounces back, because it's very important this year for Tovar to continue to take another step, and also for the health of the Rockies as a whole, because that's a pillar, and they decided on that very early.
Yeah. So that middle infield's a mess, and we'll just touch on a couple of these, not as impactful because it's opened up some other opportunities. Ryan Fellner, he's just dealing with some lower back discomfort. Hasn't been too serious. He's out there making starts, which is good. Austin Gomber's dealing with the shoulder. He's been out for a while. Who knows? Could be another month before he's back. I don't know if we lost Kenneth again, but yeah, we'll see what happens with old Austin Gomber. But that one's opened up Chase Dolander to get his shot with the Rockies, which is really good. Now here on this Tuesday. Ooh, now we've got two Kenneths.
And we're back to the computer now. All right. This is going swimmingly, Skyler.
There we go. Technical difficulties. But I would just mention Austin Gomber's shoulder out for a month. But this is one where you're like, take your time, because it's giving Chase Dolander an opportunity to develop at the big league level like we all want to see him do. And he's taking his licks, but he's also putting in some good performances like he did in his start on Wednesday against the Braves. Looking really good until he had to come out because of a cracked nail that was bleeding, whatnot, but probably not too much to worry about there. But Gomber goes down, a clear, perfect depth piece, and that maybe gets a little shaky beyond that of unknown quantities because it's what Blaylock, Tanner Gordon, Carson Palmquist, kind of that other starting depth right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And Gomber, first on Gomber, I really am concerned about the injury itself because the
Yeah.
most recent update is he hasn't even been throwing since what, the middle of spring training, maybe the third week of spring training, something along those
Well,
lines.
he made that one start in Albuquerque and then they shut him down.
Yeah, and so it's been pretty serious to the point of like we don't want to risk any further damage, and I think that that just speaks to the possible severity of this injury
Yeah.
that he's going through. So that is concerning in its own right, because it's just one of those things where it's the unknown of how bad is it really, and that's
Yeah.
never a fun place to be. You're right in the silver lining about Dollander, and it is an opportunity for them to get him the exposure. And honestly, it's something that they really need from a marketing or just fan interest perspective too. So there is some benefit in an opportunity arising. But you talk about some guys with experience, like a Tanner Gordon or Blaylock, but you're looking at Carson Palmquist, you're looking at Sean Sullivan, maybe Gabe Hughes. They kind of also need to earn their stripes a little bit more in the minors.
Yeah.
Hughes, especially, just not having pitched over the past year and a half. So, um, this is really starting to smell like one of those seasons where the Rockies are going to be really heavy on the waiver wire and DFA list and just throwing any Chase Anderson or Jose Urania that they can find at the wall again. And, just for guys that have watched, for people that have been watching Rockies games for the past couple of seasons, there's a lot of wasted games on guys that are just picked up because they need an arm. And they're kind of driving towards that again. If a Sullivan, if a Hughes, if a um, Carson Palmquist isn't quite there yet. So it's concerning in that aspect. And also, Austin Gobber's the last piece of the Arenado trade. Like you kind of need a win there from the last remaining piece on it. So that's just another thing that feeds into everything that is the dismal start to the Rockies 25 season.
Yeah. And we won't go into the Chris Bryant stuff right now.
It's bad.
We can move along here, but yeah, it's you feel for the guy with just dealing with the back, and it feels like the next logical thing is gonna have to get back surgery. That seems like the most logical thing for him to do next,
Yeah.
just because it's beyond baseball. Like this is a livelihood thing,
Mm-hmm.
and like, dude, just take care of yourself. The Rockies are used to not playing, not are used to you not being on the field. Like they'll be fine without him.
Yeah, honestly, and it opens up at bats for Jordan Beck. Maybe you'll see Zach Veen come back and be a little bit more polished and ready to go. So not having Bryant in the lineup does force the hand of playing some other guys on the roster, hopefully more young guys. And again, silver linings is kind of the theme with the Rockies in
Yeah,
2025.
because there's not much else.
Yeah, definitely not wins.
But yeah, I think of these teams that we'll talk about, they're the ones where the lack of depth is showing. Those cracks in the foundation are showing once again. We already knew they were
Mhm.
there, but they're resurfacing again. And they have all the plans, but they don't. It feels like maybe sometimes they don't. You don't anticipate like, oh, this guy's going to get injured, but who
You
knows?
know,
They put
one
all their eggs in a basket, and then it looks behind like, oh, dang, like we don't have a guy to replace him.
I'll try not to go on too much of a rant with this, but the Rockies were very fortunate with rotation health for a good period
Mm-hmm.
of years, especially when they made back-to-back playoff appearances. And I think that they just kind of fell in love with that notion that that's the way things go, and they're learning the hard way
Yeah,
that it doesn't. And so, again, this is why every offseason you question, what are you guys doing? Because if you start thinking about the worst case scenarios, who boy, they don't seem prepared. And here we are, 5-25, seeing that, yeah, it doesn't look like they were very prepared for
yeah.
some blows to their roster.
And I think it's them probably adjusting to the minor league roster limits that got constrained even more. So then that
Sure.
limits your ability to go out and get those random guys on minor league deals to stash in AAA as depth pieces, because then they'd have to get rid of maybe some other prospects because they don't have room for everybody. And so there's just a lot of things that go into it. But
Yeah,
ugh,
we can go on for days there.
yeah, we
That's
could.
for sure.
But let's move along here. All right, we'll go back up to the top of the division, up around the Dodgers. who we knew this was going to be an issue coming into the season, Kenneth, but it's the rotation that is getting hit with the injuries, which was already going to be the concern, and those things are coming to fruition. Blake Snell has been on the injured list. Tyler Glasnow has been put on the injured list. Two of your big guys signed for big money. It hurts, but this may be something that they also anticipated, perhaps.
Yeah, and we talked about the Dodgers being the envy of the league for all of this rotation depth they're able to build up, and part of it is players just want to go to the Dodgers too because it's better for their careers, it's better for their development. So nobody feels sorry for the Dodgers, I think is the best way to put it. But at the same time, man, no team is expecting to go out and lose arguably their top two arms, but a Glasnow and a Snell are usually aces for a franchise. And so that's going to hurt a team no matter what. There might be a little bit of fortunate timing going on with it right now because you have Clayton Kershaw kind of seeming like he's ready to come back sooner than normal Clayton Kershaw years. And also Tony Gonsolin, just returned. So they still have all this depth. They still have plenty of pieces that they can plug in and make a quality rotation. Never mind, Roki Sasaki and Yamamoto are still flinging it and doing just fine, So, again, nobody feels sorry for the Dodgers, but the big thing with LA, you got to look at what October is going to look like for them. And if you don't get a healthy Glasnow, and if you don't have a healthy Snell, that really hurts their championship ambition. So I think that's the biggest takeaway I have for them.
Yeah, they've been tapping. They'll have to tap back into it. Bobby Miller is down there in AAA still. Landon Knack. So they have guys with some big league experience that they can turn to, for starting pitching down there in AAA and whatnot. So they'll be fine for the most part because you can trust a Dodgers, rookie pitcher, one of those depth pieces coming up and being good enough, or they can always go look around for someone. But I think it comes with I think like we had talked about, this is something that the Dodgers maybe kind of planned for where, we don't expect these guys to be out there 200 plus innings a season for some of these guys because of the injury history. We just need them to go out there and be dominant when they are on the field. We'll fill in the cracks when they get put down. Not in that sense.
They go down. When they go down, yeah. There's no euthanasia in Major League Baseball, but I think the best laid plan was ultimately, hey, when we want to give these guys some rest, we'll go ahead and do it, and that's when we can call up a Gavin Stone, a Bobby Miller. I'm sure Roki Sasaki is the first name that comes to mind because everybody was like, how are they going to manage his innings? That type of stuff. So. And then the backup option is in case of emergency, when injury bugs start biting, we're just going to be forced to use these guys, but we're comfortable being able to do that. Now, if Snell and Glasnow are out long term, if these end up being season-ending injury, something like that, I do expect them to be active. I do expect them to add another high caliber arm, unless Bobby Miller, shows up and gives us the guy 2 years ago or something. But again, that's the luxury of riches that LA is. It's not just the money spent, it's how wisely they have constructed this roster and everything behind it. So as a Dodgers fan, you feel pretty comfortable, but you still don't want to be losing guys that are going to give you your best chance to win a World Series.
Yeah, no, and it's nicer on that pitching side because they anticipated that. They planned like, well, we're going to be pitching October. That was our expectation. So our roster and rotations kind of built in that aspect where we just got to get to October.
And
I like what you said because if they're depth pieces, they have that luxury. If they're not working out, they have that luxury of, well, we can just go out and get somebody. Pretty easy. Now, are they going to go out and get a Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins? Maybe.
Yeah, honestly, maybe. That could be.
Or they could just swing a trade and like one of those little more minor trades that doesn't seem like a huge thing, but the guy turns into a stud for him, down the stretch. Kind of like when they picked up Michael Kopech, like it's pretty notable, but nobody expected him to be as good as he was when they picked him up.
You don't have to be the guy when you go to LA. That's the nice part. They already have the guys. So the pressure's off in that sense. The funny part with Sandy Alcantara, I'm not so sure that Sandy is living up to LA standards right now. The name value obviously is one
Yeah.
thing, but how much is he moving the needle with what he's shown post surgery? At the end of the day, though, even if Bobby Miller is just kind of meh and bouncing back and forth, at the very least, he's going to be a pretty appealing option on the trade market for a team that might be looking to flip a rental piece or, a guy who's staring down free agency after the 2026 season or something. Bobby Miller is still a good trade chip that they could use along with everything else in their system too. So they've set themselves up for numerous options. And to start out with, they don't want to, pull the trigger and start wheeling and dealing
Yeah.
before May, obviously. But if they give May and into June and it's still not working out 6, 7 weeks from now, yeah, I think that there
Yeah.
starts becoming more of an emphasis because the Dodgers are in the ultimate win now mode. They expect to win a World Series every year. And, besides this point too, when we talk about some of the guys that are making this hurt a little bit less, Dustin May, let's go back to him. He's been awesome again, So again, nobody feels bad for LA right now.
Yeah. And you've got Clayton Kershaw on the horizon once again. He's not going to be the Kershaw of old, but he's still a Hall of Fame pitcher who Dodger bleeds Dodger blue. You'll get him back some point, and then Tony Gonsolin, who's back with that rotation. That's probably a really nice reinforcement to get back because he has shown some really good flashes in his time with the Dodgers, where he looks almost unhittable there on the mound.
Tony Gonsolin's kind of like the Chris Taylor or Kike Hernandez of Dodgers pitching.
Yeah,
Yeah, is what I kind of feel like,
It's perfect.
And it again, like you said, it's a good piece, and it feels like a bit of a luxury at times for a team like LA. But yeah, he's big time needed right now. When it comes to Tony Gonsolin, and this is almost entirely besides the point. Have you ever heard of the band called Rejects? With a
No.
3? Okay. Well, apparently his walkout song is Cat Daddy, and he's known as the Cat Man. I never knew any of this crap about him,
Oh, you
but
didn't?
that was the first paragraph in the article about Tony Gonsolin's return to the rotation. So, Cat Daddy, Tony Gonsolin back in town. But again, man, it's an important piece that you forget about for a period of time until he shows back up. And you're like, oh, I forgot how awesome this guy was.
Yeah.
We already did that last month with Dustin May, and it's probably going to be the story of May with Tony Gonsolin. And then in June, Clayton Kershaw.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, they don't just have to trade to get reinforcements. They just have reinforcements coming from their own organization just throughout the year.
It's more organizing flights. That's the difficult part for the Dodgers.
Yeah. But yeah, like you look at their rotation, to see Snell and Glasnow go down, maybe some other teams you just start sweating bullets a bunch, but because it's the Dodgers, you're like, yeah, that sucks. It will probably hurt for a little bit, but they're going to be okay. And that's a credit to the Dodgers of how they've operated, how they've built their roster, how they've built depth and developed depth throughout these last 10 years plus of how they've operated and built their depth, where it's a well-oiled machine that just keeps churning out. Well, he goes down. Well, we've got this guy who can replace him for now.
I mean, they're the gold standard for that reason, because they've set themselves up for success no matter what. We'll get to the Padres, but I want to make a good equivalent that I feel is pretty fair. If you look at the San Diego Padres and you just say Michael King and Dylan Cease, both down with shoulders, who knows when they're back? How you feeling about San Diego's fortunes for the rest of the season? Right?
Yeah.
You're that scares the crap out of you. LA can handle it. And honestly, you can't really name another organization in baseball very confidently that can weather that kind of storm. So again, that's why they're the gold standard.
Yeah, and there's bound to be a guy in their top 30 prospects that it's just right around the corner that they'll be able to call up, and dude just makes his debut and looks unhittable.
They kind of have they have a create a player feature in the menu that nobody else knows about, I guess. But seriously, the testament, that's why guys want to go to LA, even if they know that there is so much traffic ahead of them of younger, higher paid talent, whatever the case may be. Blake Trinan is never going to want to leave LA, even if he'll have opportunities elsewhere, because he knows it's the best spot for his career, his development, his abilities. And that's one reason why they build depth is their reputation, and it's one that they've earned. And so man, guys want to go to LA for a reason. And when injuries hit, they become part of a championship caliber club.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think Dodgers, they'll be fine. Position player wise, they're pretty healthy. Everyone's
Mm-hmm.
looking good so far. And so even then, if somebody does go down, they've got the pieces, they've got the tools that maybe they can turn to, and they'll approach it the same way they do with the pitching.
Yeah, or be very, very careful and make sure nothing further develops from their injuries, i.e.,
Yeah,
Freddie Freeman after the Japan series.
yeah, like that, the ankle and all that stuff. They know how to manage him enough.
Mm-hmm.
Freddie, like, stop trying to leg out those doubles.
Yeah, just go sit on the couch for a week, hang out, you'll be fine.
Well, Freddie, just get on first, and then the guy behind you will hit a home run. So,
Right? We'll put Ohtani behind you. We'll be fine.
yeah. And there's another one, like another reinforcement. Maybe at some point, the Shohei Ohtani back on the mound is just in the back of everybody's mind.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the ultimate wild card of that. That's Ohtani showing up in August or September. And then, hey, by the way, I'm going to be here for the playoffs, so enjoy
yeah.
that.
Oh, hey, Ohtani, we're having some trouble in the bullpen. You want to go be the closer? Like,
Gosh.
okay.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the first two-way position player. There's going to be a switch where they have to get rid of the DH because Ohtani moves from right field to pitcher to close out a game. I'm going to love that.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Dodgers, I'm not too worried about those injuries. Like, this is just normal history for some of these guys. Like Glasnow, it's just a tradition at this point. He goes down, and Snell,
Yeah.
all that stuff. But I think
You're worried
they're
about
in
the
a good spot.
extent.
Yeah,
You're worried about the extent of those two guys, though, because again, major contributors. So the thing to watch isn't how are the Dodgers going to get through this; it's how bad are the shoulders for
yeah,
Glasnow and Snell, respectively.
yep. Mm-hmm. But Dodgers, good place so far. Still, that brings us up, like you alluded to, the Padres, who thus far pitching wise doing good. It's
Fine.
been just it's the outfield shuffle that has
Hmm.
really been in hitting them. Jackson Merrill goes down. That was probably the biggest one that has impacted them. But at this point, you're not hearing too much about it because Padres are still finding guys. Gavin Sheets has been pretty good for them. Some of the other outfield options has plugged in pretty nicely for them. Obviously, you'd rather have Jackson Merrill out there, but some of the other guys have picked up the slack, like Fernando Tatis Jr. They've made up for his absence where you don't have to worry as much, but there's just been a little bit of the shuffling out there for him.
Yeah, and again, this was going to be kind of the Padres thing of just whoever's available and productive, put them in
Mm-hmm.
there. Let's go. But you needed those stalwarts of Tatis, Bogarts, Machado, and I think Merrill established himself very well as that centerpiece, that pillar of the lineup. And he was off to a great start too. I think that they're also probably trying to be as cautious as they can because this is a long-term plan with somebody like Jackson Merrill. So they're weathering it well. I think that this is a real testament to just how well San Diego is able to work within their own margins. We all know how much of a squeeze this roster has been on, so
Mm-hmm.
to speak, but they were prepared to go in with the most depth that they could afford,
Yeah.
essentially. And it's being tested early, and they're doing pretty well. The nice part, if you want to say it that way, is the majority of their injuries have been coming on the offensive side of the ball,
Yeah.
where they already had a plan in place of kind of shuffling guys around, as you said, as having some rotational guys. On the pitching side of things, they were already thin heading into this. If you lose basically one of Pavetta, Cease, or King, that could be a real major blow. And so they have avoided that. That hasn't been a problem. But that's where you worry as a Padres fan. That's where you feel that they are very thin. And if something were to go down there, that could be real bad news for them.
Yeah. And looking at Jackson Merrill, last Friday, Mike Schilt, the manager, said it would be a little aggressive for Merrill to be ready to return to action at the start of their next homestand, which began back on the 25th. So probably would miss at least maybe another week or
Mm-hmm.
so. This dang hammies, they're awful, so persistent. But
Hamstrings and obliques, they stick around.
yeah, it's either he's going to be back in 10 days to may never see him again type of thing.
He doesn't have a hamstring anymore, actually. So
he lost
sorry,
his leg.
Lieutenant Dan.
But yeah, so second round now, are the options, all of the options, doing better in the absence of some of these outfielders? No. Jason Hayward, who just got back from an injury, just got reactivated yesterday. He's kind of been old man Jason Hayward on the field, where he's fine defensively, but offensively, you're not getting much from him. And so it's like they have the pieces in place. It's are these pieces contributing? And so far, it's kind of like, nah, not
Yeah.
really.
A good parallel that I want to make is Yuli Gurriel. That was a tryout guy, so to speak. That was somebody that they tried to throw into the roster as a veteran producer, see if he could, add some contribution to what they feel is a very strong playoff team. And it wasn't working out. And they designated him. They moved on pretty quickly from it. I think that there's a little bit more sentimentality or clubhouse leadership with somebody like Jason Hayward that will give him a longer leash, so to speak. But if we're talking All-Star break and Jason Hayward is still posting an OPS that starts with 5, oh boy, I don't know, how long of a leash they can give someone like that, but they're working within their margins, as we mentioned. I think there's someone like Tiso Ornelas who is still they're trying to kind of push and be ready to take over if it happens. But you see that there's not a ton of depth, and that's because they've been so aggressive on the trade market over the past couple of years. And so it's not for lack of drafting or developing to a degree. It's just the fact that they went real big, along the way. So it's cost them their depth at this time. But I think that the team on the field, the management up, in the press box, they know that this is their best shot. Probably, and they're going to have to make it work with whatever they got. So it's a desperate team that's also playing like it, and that I mean that as a compliment, to be honest.
Yeah, they're making it work so far, and that's like where we mentioned some of those stalwart guys are doing their part, and it makes up for some of the shortcomings of some of the other guys.
2 big points that one positive and one negative that I want to make about the Padres in the upcoming months that I want to watch for. Darvish, they're hoping. May, will be coming around. Nobody expects Darvish to be old Texas Rangers crazy ace Darvish, but this is a very good piece that could be added to that rotation and make you feel a little bit better if one of their big 3 right now misses some time. So that's kind of the glass half full side of it looking forward. On the other side, when have we ever seen a full season out of Fernando Tatis Jr.? So you kind of are hoping and praying that this is the year where it kind of breaks through and he gives you a full 162, whatever the equivalent is of a full season, and hopefully maintains this insane bonkers MVP start that he's having on there. But man, he's no stranger to missing time. So what happens when a Tatis or a Machado goes down? That's the biggie with them.
Yeah. You got to worry about that because you look at who's on their injured list right now. Position players: Jake Cronenworth, Mason McCoy, who's an infielder, and then Brandon Lockridge, who had been brought up to replace Jackson Merrill, kind of thing. He goes down, Jackson Merrill, and then on that pitching side, Joe Musgrove, he's gone. Tommy John surgery for the year. Matt Waldron, he's got a strained oblique that he's had since middle of March, and then Darvish, who's had that elbow inflammation back in mid-March as well. Big ones, and then you got other guys, some of your relief pitchers, Johnny Brito, Logan Gillespie, Brian Honing, Sean Reynolds. So they're getting hit in areas, but it's partly like maybe it's part of the surprise of we saw some of these injuries, and then the Padres are doing better, are doing good despite some of these injuries, especially rotation and stuff.
I think everybody expected them to be a competent team, and if they started losing some pieces, could they make it work through there? They're still right there in first place. They're still right there with the Dodgers, at least in terms of product on the field so far. Do you expect it to last? That's kind of the thing with them. But credit where it's due. That's what I mean by this is a desperate team kind of showing it and meaning it in a positive way. They know they can't afford to go through any long stretches and keep up with an LA, keep up with an Arizona. And so for where they have been right now, And especially on the bullpen side, they're one of those model organizations that you never really worry about a bullpen with San Diego, right?
Yeah.
They could be losing anybody along the way. They always seem to be fine in that department. So it's ancillary injuries, but the margin for error with this organization right now is so thin that it makes you sweat a little bit.
Yeah. But I think that's the nice thing. They've got the surprise. They're chugging along, doing their
Mhm.
thing, and hopefully it keeps on going for them. And then they can just get even better when they get maybe some of these pieces back and they're in a much better spot when they're fully healthy and just to see what they can do. But right now they're kind of beat up. They've duct taped it together. It's working well, and hopefully it can continue for them.
So far, their plans are working out.
Yeah.
And that's all I can say with them. And that was a big concern with them. And that's even without Dylan Cease kind of being the dude
Yeah.
that you expected him to be too. So it's a lot of credit and a lot of flowers that I think you have to give to San Diego right now.
Yeah. Good for them. Now let's move out to the Giants, who we don't have to talk too much about them because there's really nothing to talk about with them. Where
That's a good thing.
Yeah, this is the good thing in the context of this conversation that we're having.
Mm-hmm.
There's really been no major blows to them thus far. Now, like we talked about last week, the biggest thing for them is that just Willie Adames hasn't really kicked in yet, offensively and all that stuff. But Tyler Fitzgerald went down maybe a little bit of something, but so far not too serious or anything. That's pretty much the extent of it. But Casey Schmidt has that oblique strain, and then Hirar Encarnacion. I don't even know who he is. But
Yeah,
no.
that's all you need to say.
Yeah.
Hyvar Encarnacion, figure it out.
Yeah.
Tom Murphy. Yeah, Tom Murphy, former Rockies great Tom Murphy, maybe a backup catcher. Like that's kind of they're missing as one of the most notable names.
Yeah.
They haven't been hit very hard. Tyler Fitzgerald is somebody that has gotten off to a pretty fast start, though. So I think that was some reason to kind of be concerned a little bit. And Casey Schmidt really impressed with the bat last year. Maybe you look at it and say, okay, he's been kind of subpar so far to start this year. Maybe it's the oblique. And so you can even look at that in a positive light. Like, okay, maybe he could use some time off,
Mm-hmm.
There's not much to the Giants right now other than a Verlander and an Adames. They're not quite doing what you wanted them to, but hey, the Giants are right there with everybody else in the West, not named the Rockies. So again, it's working out pretty well so far.
Yeah, and you go looking over on roster resource, you look through their system, and you look into the minor league system. A lot of depth there with guys in case something does happen. But maybe a couple of relief pitchers that are on the injured list down in the minors. Nothing too serious. It's like you even look down that, and like, okay, they're in a good spot. They're healthy. It's just a matter of keeping things rolling and just getting guys producing more and more, getting more of the guys producing than already are producing, just adding more into the group.
And then you also look at, we talked about the Rockies and having some silver linings of some guys coming through. If the Giants, especially on the pitching side, start to get hit a little bit, boy, they have a Carson Whisenhunt that's probably going to be knocking on the door a little bit. On the probably not the rotation side, but in the relief side, Mason Black is someone that's kind of been a darling a little bit for spin rate people that will, possibly be able to step in. So you feel pretty good about where the Giants are at, even if they don't wow you necessarily outside of one or two guys.
Yeah, and like you got Kyle Harrison, Keaton Wynn, you got Tristan Beck, you've got Carson Seymour, bunch of guys pitching wise. Where something's happened to Verlander, we're gonna be okay because one, he's not really doing much for us in the first place, but we've got guys that can replace him.
The big thing sorry to interrupt on that, but one of the big things we talked about it with the Padres, where if you lose a Tatis, how screwed are you? I think there are two very prominent guys that the Giants just simply cannot be without, and that's Logan Webb and Matt Chapman. So if something happens there, I could really see that being a bit of a death blow. But hey, so far they really have avoided this conversation almost altogether.
Yeah, and you hope Jung Ho Lee can also stay healthy because, like we
True
talked
story.
about last week, he's doing really well. If you lose, it's more precarious where, like we were saying, you hope these guys, okay, they're healthy. They need to produce, though, while they're healthy, and they're not getting that from everybody. They're getting carried quite a bit by a couple of guys.
And Lee is a perfect example of that. And you brought up a really good point because he didn't come to mind for me initially. But look at the Giants last year and look at the Giants this year. Big difference is Jung Ho Lee, honestly. So that is one. I'll put it as three guys then that you cannot lose. But that's just the feeling with the Giants, where it's kind of a stars and scrubs to a degree
Yeah.
roster a little bit. Especially on the pitching side, though, they could lose all four starters, and I'd be okay as long as one of them isn't named Logan Webb. That
Right.
one I think is a critical piece for them.
Yeah, absolutely. But so far, they're hanging in there, off to a
Mhm.
good start to the season, and hopefully they can keep it up and keep on surprising. But
Yeah.
who
So
knows?
the Giants are kind of a nothing burger on the injury conversation. The Diamondbacks, though, man, the Diamondbacks are it's starting to pile up pretty badly right now.
Yeah, and the big one, another hamstring, Ketel Marte. That's been the biggest one, and he's been out since the beginning of April. Hopefully, maybe back sometime in early May. But I think the interesting thing is the route that they went in filling his roster spot while he's been on the injured list. Where perfect opportunity, put in Jordan Lawler. Okay,
Mhm.
but no, they went with Tim Tawa. Hopefully, that's how you say his name. But they
Yeah,
went with him, and an interesting
not impressive.
development there.
Yeah, it's not impressive. And then you would think that that would lead you to a natural assumption that, oh, Jordan Lawler is just not
Yeah.
impressing necessarily. Jordan Lawler's been awesome for Reno. Now, it's the Pacific Coast League.
Mm,
Obviously, you take all of the numbers with a grain of salt. But anytime a guy is going up there and putting together an OPS over 1,000 and, WRC plus in the minor leagues, take it for what you want. It's
mm-hmm.
178 WRC plus for Jordan Lawler in AAA. It's just those very clear numbers of this guy has graduated. This guy is now above this level. I think if you want to look at it, from a different lens, they're trying to ensure maybe that he's not a 4A guy, quad A guy kind of thing. Sure, maybe you can make that argument, but they're trying him and getting him comfortable at all three infield positions outside of first base or catcher, obviously. But the left side and second base, they were really priming him to take over, and for whatever reason, didn't decide to pull the trigger. Now it's working out, so it's hard to really question them. But we spent a lot of time talking about Jordan Lawler because this is someone that could make a huge impact for the Diamondbacks and in the National League playoff picture.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and it's hard not to because the Diamondbacks have been a very good franchise for the past couple seasons. That they're holding him back for the right reasons, and
Mm-hmm.
he does finally get to the majors. He's going to succeed, hit the ground running, be that stalwart in there, so to speak. But we talked about Adel Amador coming up and getting a little bit of opportunity because of the Tyro Estrada injury. Sure, made a lot of sense, and it was a natural assumption that that would be the case with Lawler and Marte. But here we are.
Yeah. And Tim Tawa, he's got 4 homers, and he's slugging 480, doing fine defensively. So,
Hmm.
but other than that, it's like, well, he's there. Like, it's not too much. And the other options like Garrett Hampson would be playing second base. That's really their
Yeah.
only other option right now.
Neither of those guys are any sort of a long-term answer. Now,
Yeah.
I understand nobody's trying to replace Ketel Marte. That's, part of it all. But again, it made a whole lot of sense on paper for Lawler to just step right in, get some more experience,
Yeah.
and then once Marte is healthy, hey, maybe Lawler just carved himself a role, or maybe we send him back down for some seasoning and then use him again when we need him. But Tim Tawa, who knew? Who knew that that was going to be a guy that was going to be
Yeah.
a regular for the Diamondbacks for a period of time?
Yeah. No, and the other guys down there in the minors, you got Blaze Alexander down there. Blaze. Uh, but there's Connor Kaiser that they signed as a depth role as well, middle
Mhm.
infield guys. So Lawler is like that prime one that's waiting and just to get an opportunity. But so far they'll hang in there and hopefully get Ketel Marte back here pretty soon and get that old hammy all straightened out when I make sure it's all nice and healthy. Ugh, got to stretch before you run, kids.
Yeah, no kidding. But we talk about some of the most important players for any of these teams. Ketel Marte is right up there in the
Yeah,
conversation with anybody because that's the 1B to Corbin Carroll's 1A in Arizona's
yeah,
lineup.
and like there's a entirely different scenario where the Diamondbacks, luckily, all other guys are doing well right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's an entirely possible scenario in the parallel universe where he goes down and the Diamondbacks nosedive a little bit offensively because a lot of our other offensive pieces, they're just not performing. Corbin Carroll, he's off to a slow start. All these things, but luckily that's not the case. They're hanging in there where they've, like we were talking about with the Padres, Kenneth, where the rest of the offense has made his absence less notable because they're doing their part.
And you also feel a lot better when Pavin Smith is coming in and
Yeah.
making a name for himself and becoming, a dude in front of your eyes. So um, we we spend a lot of time and focus a lot on just don't have a bad first half, Arizona. Just play 500 ball and then do what you do in the second half and you'll be fine. They've done that and more. And while also losing one of the, I don't know, 3 or 4 guys that felt pretty indispensable for this roster. So um, it's again why this organization deserves the benefit of the doubt. Now, would I have liked to see Jordan Lawler come in? Absolutely, because I think that this is Royce Lewis City, where if you put him in the lineup, it's going to go bonkers. But hey, Josh Naylor was an offseason acquisition. He's doing awesome right now. And Suarez, it's empty batting average, but he's providing some serious pop along the way too. So it's a pretty healthy and balanced roster and it's showing and keeping them afloat while they're losing, honestly, one of their heartbeats in Ketel Marte. The pitching side, though, it's starting to add up.
Yeah, really one that kind of solved a problem was Jordan Montgomery. He's out for the year with the Tommy John surgery. That solved a starting pitching kind of problem that they had of, well, where does he
Solved a
fit in with
soap
everything?
opera more than
Yeah,
anything.
and then they lost Blake Walston,
Mhm.
rookie, first round draft pick in 2019. Lost him to Tommy John surgery. He's out for the year. But then, in the bullpen, a couple of guys. AJ Puck went down with elbow inflammation back on April 17th, and then Kendall Graveman has been down since the beginning of March with a strained back lumbar. But
Yeah.
hopefully, come back soon. We're around the corner, but already, I think that bullpen specifically is where you're a little more concerned with Puck down. Hopefully, Graveman can come back soon. But
Yeah. It's not ideal, but it's also not losing Corbin Burns or Zach Gallen, so it's not quite that gut punch yet. But we talked about an inexperienced bullpen a little bit with
yeah,
Arizona and some unprovenness. AJ Puck and Shelby Miller also, honestly, have added some veteran assurance in there along with Jalen Beeks. So it's worked out better than expected. But the more of these pieces you start taking away, the thinner they become, and then the injuries in certain years they just don't stop. There are teams that you can just look at them and say, what happened? Like that's just the worst luck kind of thing. And so
mm-hmm.
these are also pitching injuries on that side that are full years, is what we're looking at. AJ Puck right now is seeking a second opinion. That's kind of up in the air. That sure feels like I'm trying to avoid surgery if possible,
Yeah,
though. So it is worrisome. Now, I think obviously Shelby Miller and Jalen Beeks, you feel pretty good about the bullpen. You think Kendall Graveman, who was kind of that offseason veteran, he's been there, he can teach him, he can also be effective. You hope he comes back and you hope he starts hitting the ground running. And then also Justin Martinez, high octane stuff. Maybe it's your chance to step into the role. You can see how it all works out. But you can also see how the more you keep taking away, the more it inevitably kind of just hinders your ability to perform on one side of the ball. And Jordan Montgomery, there's way more off the field with Jordan Montgomery than I think people focus on the on-field product. But right now, Eduardo Rodriguez is not impressive. He's doing a 24 Jordan Montgomery,
mm-hmm.
impersonation. If you had a healthy Jordan Montgomery, maybe you'd be trying him out and he could flip that narrative a little
Yeah,
bit from last season too. But instead, you kind of have to ride with what you got with Rodriguez. So again, that's just showing the lack of depth, whether it's taken away by injuries or just you never established it because you weren't prepared. It shows up, and you kind of worry about that with Arizona in the long run for this year.
yeah. If you go on look at their depth charts, guys down in AAA. No, it's like relievers, a lot of names you've seen: Bryce Jarvis, Joe Manaply, Kyle Nelson, and then a lot of other veterans: John Curtis, Rockies legend. Uh, a lot of older players
Two
or
S's.
players with some experience and whatnot. Same with and then starting pitching. There's Tommy Henry, Dre Jameson. We've seen them big league level. I'm sure we've seen a couple of these other guys too. You know, they've
Oh,
signed
yeah.
Brandon Bialik, who has some big league experience. Casey Kelly. So, like you're saying, what happens if something does happen to a Corbin Burns or any of those really starting pitchers or more of those relievers? You get a little bit more worrisome of, can the depth pick up the slack, so to speak?
And this is going to really test just how well they've been able to develop their pitching depth outside of a Brandon Pfaadt.
Yeah.
Because in that same draft, you had Brandon Pfaadt, Dre Jameson, and Blake Walston, who we mentioned earlier, and these were all pretty notable arms that they figured to start pushing through the system. Dre Jameson was somebody who went down with Tommy John himself, and so is having to bounce back. I'm a big believer in that. I think Bryce Jarvis was a relatively high pick as well. So it's time to kind of put your money where your mouth is,
Yeah.
I guess, with Arizona on some of that. Casey Kelly is fascinating if you haven't heard his story, by the way, too, because he's a converted infield prospect, but I believe from maybe an outfield prospect. He was one of the first attempts as a two-way guy in minor league baseball, and it didn't work out, and he completely fell apart, and then he became a full-time pitcher, and he's kind of floated around since then. It'd be interesting if he comes back up and he starts making a name for himself and stuff, and finally establish himself as a big leaguer. But you can't count on a guy who's kind of a career minor leaguer if you're expecting to compete for a division, compete for a National League pennant, compete for a World Series. So that's where you're worried a little bit if you're Arizona. But I do like at least the talent that they've set up behind it. It's starting to feel like a proven time for some of
Yeah.
these guys too.
Yeah. It's kind of like, oh, see what you've got and see what's going to work, what won't, and everything. And now you look at the position player wise, down there in AAA itself, it's a hodgepodge of a lot of top draft picks,
Mm-hmm.
some random minor league free agents.
Trey Mancini.
Yeah, Trey Mancini trying to make that comeback. You got Christian Pache down there in AAA. Now a bunch of random catchers like Rene Pinto, Aramis Garcia. They've done that part of, we're gonna just acquire a bunch of guys like a lot of these smaller market teams do, bringing guys on minor league contracts and stash them in AAA as depth pieces when we need them, which is
Mm-hmm.
good. That's a smart thing to do. But it's like a lot of these guys break glass in case of emergency, and please stay healthy. Corbin Carroll and Corbin Burns.
Yeah. Who can lose their best offensive player and best pitcher and feel good if you're not the Dodgers. So, that's an evergreen statement. But um I think one of the products of them having poor first halves is they just didn't have the pieces around these guys to support the down periods of a struggling Corbin Carroll or an injured Ketel Marte or a Zach Gallen or a Merrill Kelly going down. So it's a testament to how well they bolstered the pieces around a core that got them to a World Series 2 years ago. So it's again, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt for everything they've done up to this point. And then one other thing that I'll have, we talked about the Dodgers, obviously being able to buy whatever they want. Arizona still has a pretty good stockpile of young talent, whether it's on the major league roster or still in the minors. So I think if it does come down to a buyer's market, looking for starting pitching, something along those lines, and they want to make a big swing, I think they can match anybody's offer that's out there too. So I don't count them out on being able to improve their club, even if it's not through the depth they already have on hand.
Yeah, absolutely. But so far, they'll get some of these guys back. You don't have to worry too much about, like we're saying, you just hope it doesn't start to pile up where, when it rains, it pours. You hope that's not in the forecast for the Diamondbacks. You can deal with a Ketel Marte going down for a bit. It sucks, but we have a guy to replace him. But if he goes down and then Carroll goes down or a Naylor goes down, more and more guys start stacking up, then you get a little bit more Ugh.
Yeah, the reluctance. And the funny part about it, though, is, if Ketel Marte goes down, you got Jordan Lawler.
Yeah.
If Corbin Carroll goes down, you have Alec Thomas. You have some other guys that will be in that outfield mix that aren't getting as much
Yeah.
playing time. If Josh Naylor goes down, you've been seeing what Pavin Smith has been
Yeah.
doing this year too. So the depth is mostly already on the roster around these guys. And so again, this is why this is just a better constructed roster than it has been in the past couple of years. And you don't feel like Arizona's in too precarious of a position. But obviously, the more guys you lose, the more it hurts your chances.
Yeah.
And for 4 of these 5 teams, they're still sitting pretty. The National League West is still pretty beastly, even though some of these injuries are piling up a little bit. Sans the Rockies, obviously.
Yeah. Like you said, they're constructed in a way where that depth is already there on the big league roster to plug and play, and then you can call guys up to then supplement as needed.
Mm-hmm.
All 4 of these teams have done that pretty well, except the Rockies, like we said, where the cracks in the foundation have immediately been exposed.
They're geysers now.
Yeah, what was the backup plan if Tovar goes down and has to miss an extended period of time? Do you stick with Alan Trejo all year? Or are you going to bring up Ryan Ritter?
You had to reacquire Alan Trejo in the first place because of this. I mean, so the fact that, again, this is just Rockies being Rockies right now, but they had to go out and find a guy they were familiar with just because they didn't have anybody else.
Yeah.
Yep. Bummer. Bummer ending.
Oh, goodness. But on that note, yeah, otherwise, injuries, they're going to hit everybody. Some are more well-equipped to deal with it than others. And some, like the Giants, are just lucky where nothing significant's really happened to them yet. Knock on wood. Oh, man, I hope we don't jinx any of these teams now.
Hey, it won't be our fault. Like we said, it's 162 games. A baseball season is kind of too long for a human body.
It's a marathon.
Yeah,
you
but
need like
so
what? Like, I think most teams use like 50, at least 55 players over the course of a major league season, something like that. No, so
yeah,
it takes a village.
No kidding.
Man.
But so far for 4 out of 5, they're in pretty good shape, all things considered. The Dodgers have some big names you worry about. The Diamondbacks, yeah, you're starting to see some loose elbow ligaments going on out there, but otherwise, there's nothing too bad out there other than the Rockies just being a dumpster fire.
Yeah. Ugh. Rough go of it. But that'll do it here for this edition of Best of the West. Appreciate folks tuning in later on, or have tuned in during this. But you can find this over on YouTube on Blake Street Banner. Be sure to like and subscribe and watch all their other offerings on the channel. And it'll be available on your favorite podcast platform later on this week. I believe on Fridays is when it'll come out. Kenneth, where can the folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter at KDub1988, and I'll also be hanging out at Purple Row.
You can find me over on Twitter at Skyler Timmins or over on Blue Sky, stimmins13.bsky.social, as well as hanging out over at purpleroad.com, as well as talking Rockies more and more over on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Ugh. Fun times.
Kind of sounded like Sideshow Bob when he gets hit by the rake.
That's what it's like to be a fan of the Rockies, Kenneth. It's
Sideshow
walking
Bob
onto that rake every time. But and be sure to follow Blake Street Banner all on your favorite favorite platforms on social media. It's at Blake Street Banner. Plenty of all the good offerings from the guys here at the team. But until next time, I'm Skyler. That's Kenneth. This has been Best of the West, and remember, the best is yet to come.